So one of the big questions that has been asked since this project has been announced has been, where did this project come from? And why did the municipality start this project? The answer to this question has three major parts. The first is that at the beginning of every council term, newly elected councillors will get together and identify the priorities that they will collectively strive to focus on within their term of council. When council did this in 2018, they identified the growth of Chatham-Kent's population, jobs, and assessment as a high priority. Second part to that answer is that Wheatley has a lot of potential for growth. This was identified in an exercise called a Municipal Comprehensive Review, which calculates a community's overall potential for growth, identifies where that growth is likely to happen, and determines if those areas need new plans to accommodate the projected growth. The third part of the answer is that council approved the creation of the secondary land use plan for South Wheatley in recognition of the community's identified growth potential and to support the priority that council places on growing Chatham-Kent. Next slide, please. So this slide provides a high-level overview of the planning system in Ontario. We are showing you this to give you a sense of where the secondary plan fits within this planning system. So at the top of the triangle, you'll see the Planning Act, or matters of provincial interest. This is the matters of provincial interest are enumerated in this thing called the Planning Act, which is the provincial legislation that sets out the ground rules for land use planning in Ontario. It describes how land uses might be controlled and who may control them. Then there's this thing called the PPS, or Provincial Policy Statement. This thing contains the items that municipalities must, should, or may include in their official plans. It also identifies the things that the province considers to be important from a land use planning perspective. These are the matters of provincial interest, things like economy, environment, public safety, etc. Next on the triangle is municipal plans. So Chatham-Kent has this thing called the official plan, which is the top municipal-wide land use plan, which is basically a map and policies or rules that controls the short-term and long-term development of the lands within the municipality. Under that, you'll see area-specific plans. An area-specific plan, or a secondary plan, is a higher resolution but smaller scale land use plan that covers a part of a municipality and provides more detailed policies for the areas it covers, such as things like public spaces, parks, and urban design. The Imagine Wheatley secondary plan fits within that part of the triangle. And then at the individual property level, development is controlled or guided through tools like the zoning bylaw and development standards that identify what can be built and how it gets built. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the Imagine Wheatley project will lead to the creation of a new secondary plan for South Wheatley. A secondary plan, as I mentioned, is essentially a map of land uses and the policies to make it happen for a specific area. South Wheatley has historically been and continues to be predominantly agricultural in nature, with some commercial uses, as well as the wastewater treatment plant and the forest to the east of the project area. This project will identify new land uses for the area, such as residential, commercial, natural, and public space uses. The land use plan will align with council's priorities for growth, environmental sustainability, community wellness, and engagement. The project also includes a servicing strategy to support the future development of the area. The servicing strategy will account for various on-site realities, such as the relatively flat topography, the wastewater treatment plant, the area's proximity to Lake Erie, any required buffers and setbacks, as well as environmental impacts. Next slide, please. So with regards to project goals, there are 5 main goals associated with the Imagine Wheatley project. The first is to develop a land use plan, to create the map, develop the policies, and figure out the servicing requirements for the project area, things like roads, sewers, utilities, stormwater, etc. The second goal is to support the health of the local economy by growing the population, growing the labor force, and growing the demand for local goods and services. The third goal of the project is to integrate sensitive and significant environmental features into the land use planning process and protect them for the long term. The fourth goal is to identify opportunities for new public spaces, such as parks, new trails, paths, and also integrating them into the wider community. The fifth is to engage the community throughout the plan development process, of which this evening forms a key part. And with that, I will turn it back over to the Dylan team to go over the project timeline, community engagement process, and questions that were submitted in advance of tonight's engagement activities. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Gabriel. So yeah, in terms of the project timeline, the first phase, which was the project commencement and background review, that was initiated back in February 2022. And that consisted of activities related to, meeting with the municipality to confirm the project's study area boundary, the schedule, the engagement approach. We also started to identify key internal, external stakeholders, and we had one-on-one meetings with some of those stakeholders. And it was also an opportunity to review the existing policy documents and mapping to further conceptualize the existing conditions in the area. Phase 2, and that's where we are now, consists of collecting all this information, reviewing it and evaluating it to understand even better what the existing conditions are. And this is related to the land use built form, transportation networks, and that includes active transportation, water, wastewater infrastructure and capacity, stormwater infrastructure constraints, natural environment conditions. So really looking at it from a holistic approach and how all of these interact with each other and how they are how they can be conceived from an opportunities and constraints perspective. So in this phase, which is also critical, is that we're gathering feedback on issues, concerns, opportunities related to South Wheatley from yourselves, so from the residents and stakeholders. And this is going to help us to inform the vision and goals of the secondary plan. The next phase, which we're moving into pretty immediately this fall, is the preliminary land use and servicing concepts. So it's here that we're going to build off of phase 2 and synthesize and analyze these findings. And that includes our stakeholder feedback. That's going to help us to inform the preliminary land use and servicing concepts. These will then be evaluated for their consistency with the relevant policies, with land use compatibility, serviceability, the gamut, road access, built form, any requirements for land assembly, and also just aligning with any municipal development incentive programs that may exist or potentially exist. Once we've prepared the preliminary land use and servicing concepts, we are going to have a second round of engagement. It'll be hosted. It may be virtual, it may be in person. That's still really up to the COVID precautions that are in place. But we will be giving the public an opportunity to review and provide feedback on these preliminary concepts. Based on that feedback, then we are going to come up with a preferred land use and servicing strategy for South Wheatley. So with that phase 3, we'll have a summary of the work that led to the preferred land use and servicing concept, how the project team justified the selected land use and servicing alternative, and mapping that depicts the general configuration of the selected land uses and servicing alternatives. Phase 4, which is the last phase, and that's going to be rolling in the new year, so in 2023, early 2023, we will have the strategic framework, and that's going to consist of the work required to finalize and deliver a council-approved framework for the South Wheatley secondary plan. So the work will include drafting an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, as well as having a statutory public meeting. So there'll be another opportunity for public engagement. And at this point, this is where we will finalize the policy framework. So the goal is to have council adoption of the finalized official plan and amendment and zoning bylaw amendment at a council meeting being held in February. So that is the intent and the anticipated timeline. Next slide, please. And so as indicated previously, community engagement is a really important component of this entire process. Next slide, please. This really is, important to us because, we want to build a secondary plan that the community can get behind and have a shared plan and vision. So round one, and so this is where we are in round one right now for community engagement, is the introduction of the project, which we're doing tonight, and working towards a vision statement and goals. And that's what is going to come out of this initial round. Round two, again, going back to our timeline, will be the preferred land use concept. And so you'll have an opportunity again to provide comment. And round three be the presentation of the secondary plan. Next slide, please. And so overall, consultation and meaningful community involvement are key to the project's success. The Imagine Wheatley plan will be informed by how the community would like to see the area grow. And that's really one of our primary goals throughout this entire process. And just to note as well, just to go back to some of Gabriel's earlier points, that this work will not and is not intended to take away from or minimize the recovery efforts of the downtown area. Next slide, please. So we received a large number of questions from the public, and we're really grateful to have received this feedback and these inquiries. So what I'm going to do now is run through the questions that we received, provide some responses, and then any additional questions, we've put aside some time to reach out to those of you that are on the line and address any remaining questions. So next slide, please. So we've grouped the questions down into themes. The first ones I'm going to look at are regarding the secondary plan process. We've already covered probably some of these, but just to reiterate them. The first question we received was, what studies are completed to support the secondary plan process? So as Gabriel had mentioned earlier, a municipal comprehensive review was completed, which projected the growth of Wheatley. Servicing strategy is part of the project, and this will identify servicing needs that are appropriate for the area, compatible with the land use, and will enable development. The next question, why is this specific area being developed? So this area has been chosen in order to accommodate some of the future growth that has been projected for Wheatley over the upcoming years. What is the current zoning and how will that change? So the current zoning of the area is mostly agricultural. The specific future zoning is to be determined based on the outcome of this secondary plan process, but it can be anticipated to include a mix of residential, open space, public amenity, and supportive commercial uses. What type of housing is planned? This is also to be determined through the secondary plan process. However, we do anticipate a mix of residential types. And this will include single detached dwellings, semi-detached, townhouses, and potentially multi-residential. What is the timeline? So just to recap there, the project was initiated in early 2022, and the draft secondary plan is scheduled to be presented to council in early 2023. Please explain who gains from this project and how. So the community of Wheatley will be able to accommodate new residents, which is anticipated to increase local demand. And so this will also bring about infrastructure expansion and upgrades that will be of benefit to existing and future residents. Has a decision already been made regarding this project, or do the residents generally have impact? And so, really that's why we're here today, and there's going to be multiple opportunities for this input. Resident and stakeholder input has a genuine impact on this plan. No final decisions have been made beyond creating a secondary plan for the project area. The input that we are receiving today and taking into consideration in the development of land use alternatives will be shared with residents and stakeholders in the second round of community engagement, which will be taking place later in November. Will there be an in-person public meeting, and will maps to scale be mailed out? So there is the potential for in-person engagements in future phases. However, that's really contingent on, COVID-19 and pandemic restrictions. Maps will be made available for viewing online during the next round of consultation. So no, they won't be mailed out, but they will be available online. Next slide, please. So we also received a number of questions regarding the development of the area and the surrounding lands. One of the questions was, what type of development is anticipated for the secondary plan area? Are there going to be any greenhouses? So determining this will be part of the secondary plan development process. The goal of creating a land use plan is to create a map and policies for land uses that are compatible with each other. While some commercial land uses might be found to be desirable in the area, their compatibility with other uses, example, residential, will be tested as part of the plan's development process. Who currently owns the land? Are these lands owned by development companies headquartered outside of the Wheatley area? So the majority of the lands are privately owned by local developers, with one major exception being the water and wastewater treatment plants, which are owned by public utilities. It is our understanding that the majority of the lands within the project area are currently owned by local developers. What is the plan for the farmland nearest to the creek and water tower? So there are no final set plans for this farm at this time. Future uses for this farm are being studied as part of the larger planning process for the entire project area. Are there plans for greenhouses on the Leamington Merseyside side of the road? Also, are there plans for the harbor area? Is the waterfront and property alongside the harbor part of the plan? What are the plans for the Olmsted property of the harbor? And what other areas are being considered for expansion? What are the plans for lake access for the expansion? So for all of these areas, they are either outside of the municipality of Chatham-Kent, or they're outside of the boundaries of this project, and so not within the scope at this time. Oh, thanks, Kathy. When will we get a pleasure craft marina? Can we get a canal system like the one at Lighthouse Cove? So it is unlikely that a marina or canal system similar to that built in Lighthouse Cove will be permitted in the project area. The Conservation Authority has expressed a strong desire to conserve the ecological integrity of the creek system. Was the northern portion severed off? So I'm not entirely clear about the context with this question. However, if you are referring to the project boundary, that's something that's going to remain unaffected by any severances that may have occurred since the boundary was established at the outset of the project boundary. So that project area that was shown in the earlier slide is the area that is under the secondary plan development. Next slide, please. So we received a number of questions regarding downtown recovery and the explosion. One of the questions that came in was, how can this project happen simultaneously with the downtown recovery? So the two issues are separate, but they're definitely connected. This land use plan was contemplated prior to the explosion that occurred downtown, and its goal is to ensure that Wheatley can accommodate future growth, which will support the overall vitality of Wheatley by adding more residents and stimulating local demand. The downtown recovery effort is ongoing and will continue to engage residents and businesses to implement actions that will enable the downtown area to recover and prosper for the long term. The efforts to rebuild downtown are ongoing, and they remain a high priority for Chatham-Kent. What are the plans for rebuilding downtown? Is this project an effort to avoid rebuilding or abandoning the downtown? So, just again to reiterate, the ongoing recovery of the downtown area was most recently discussed at the town hall on September 15th, and regular updates are posted on the Let's Talk Chatham website. So downtown Wheatley is most certainly not being abandoned. Recovery efforts continue to be a very high priority for Chatham-Kent. Is the secondary plan an effort to relocate the downtown after the explosion? And again, no, it is not. The efforts to rebuild downtown are ongoing, and we're just seeing synergistic relationship between what happens there with the downtown and with the new secondary plan area. How will the task force be engaged on this project? So the task force has been engaged since early on in the secondary plan process, and we had met with them in the spring. We will continue to engage with them throughout the development of this plan. Are there any wells in the area that may be disturbed during development, and will a full survey be completed before any excavation is started? So with provincial wells data, that is being included in the review process with more detailed surveys completed during the pre-construction stage. Next slide, please. Now we have some questions regarding infrastructure, transportation, traffic, and roads. How will development of the secondary plan impact traffic in the surrounding area? So while the increase in residents is anticipated to lead to more traffic, impacts are projected to be minimal. A road network is being created for the project area, which may include upgrades to existing roads, which would include signalization, turning lanes, road widenings, and if warranted, construction traffic will be managed by designated trucking routes and parking plans. What will be the considerations for active transportation and trails included that connect to existing networks and trails? So yes, there will be a creation of new active transportation amenities, and we'll certainly be integration is a key component of the plan development process. Will there be a traffic circle at Pickerel Road, First Concession, Erie Street intersection, and access from the northern end water tower? So this is going to be determined through the traffic analysis that will be undertaken during the secondary plan process. This is being studied and will definitely there will be a solution recommended for this intersection. How is site access planned? Construction traffic will be managed with designated trucking routes and parking plans. And again, the land use plan includes a transportation component. How will the secondary plan area be serviced? The creation of a servicing strategy is part of this project scope. Transportation, utilities, stormwater, capacity requirements for additional water and wastewater are all going to be included in the servicing strategy. Who bears the cost of infrastructure upgrades? The municipality recently implemented a development charges bylaw, and with this, it has introduced a fee to cover the cost of infrastructure upgrades. What will be done with the Detam drain? This is also to be determined. A stormwater master plan is being created to ensure proper drainage of the project area and compatibility with the surrounding area. Existing drainage might be retained, upgraded, or altered to enhance the overall drainage of the area. Next slide, please. The next set of questions are directly related to the environment. The first question, how will environmentally sensitive areas and species, including fox snakes and snapping turtles, be considered? Also, are there plans to protect the forested shoreline of the west branch of the two creeks in the study area? So the conservation of sensitive and significant environmental features and the possibility for environmental enhancements are a priority for this plan. Compatibility between the natural environment with other land uses is being carefully studied. Any development will be done in compliance with applicable species at risk legislation, including the Provincial Endangered Species Act. How will natural features be incorporated into this plan? They'll be incorporated through a possible mix of land use designations that may include open spaces, conservation spaces, and development policies. How is the east boundary of two creeks established? The easterly boundary was established to encompass the forested area and the creek shoreline with the goal of studying options for long-term protection of the area. What environmental studies will be carried out? A desktop analysis and on-site field assessment of existing environmental features was conducted as part of the development process to inform the development of supportive land use policies. Any development in the project area will have to be done in accordance with all the applicable species at risk legislation, including the Provincial Endangered Species Act. Is input from regional ecologists and coastal erosion experts being sought for input in the plan? Yes, both local conservation authorities, so IRCA and the LTVCA, are engaged in the development of the land use plan. The process includes a desktop and on-site field assessment. The plan is also informed by the Lake Erie Shoreline Vulnerability Assessment Project, which was completed by Zuzak Inc. in 2019-2020. And then lastly, why are you planning development across Detroit line from property that the LTVCA, so the Conservation Authority, will not allow to be developed? So studying compatible forms of developments and appropriate site-specific land use policies for this area was found to be worth including in the project. Part of the project includes an assessment of current policy against the types of developments that may be compatible in this area and the creation of supportive policies. So that kind of wraps up all the questions that we received through the registration and through email. I'd like to open it up now to any additional questions from the participants as it relates to the secondary plan policies, any questions regarding the timeline, the purpose of the project. And we can even actually include comments just in the chat if you prefer to ask questions that way. So I don't see any hands. You'd like to use your raise your hand icon as well. Okay. Ryan.
Hi, thanks, Amy. Hi, everybody. It's Ryan Jocks, Director of Planning Services. You know, everybody's here. I just really hope, you know, if no one wants to ask a question, you know, in this public forum, that's okay. Please send them after, but certainly this is the opportunity, you know, to even to share your question where your neighbors, friends or acquaintances may also hear them to get an answer. So I really just wanted to say something just to prompt maybe a question or two while we had this opportunity together. Thank you.
Icon at the bottom.
Thank you, Ryan. Actually, I do see a question from Tammy Dobby. If you'd like to unmute yourself.
You can
Hi.
send it.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thanks, Tammy.
You can hear my dog too. Sorry. Yes, so I just questioning about the environmental studies and the field work that were done, and there was collaboration with IRCA and the other conservation authority, but I was just wondering if there was, I know that a lot of, having looked at studies in the area and being an ecologist in the area, a lot of the information isn't reported in studies, and it was definitely was a very short time period to be trying to do any field work. And so I worry that sometimes there are species at risk, such as red-headed woodpeckers, that I know are nesting just recently in the last couple of years on the banks of the creek. And so I'm wondering if, do you feel confident that the amount of research and what's being done environmentally is going to allow for the right kind of buffers or the right kind of development plan that's going to ensure that the natural resources and the species at risk and the amazing birding and wildlife that's here is going to be able to perpetuate? Because I think it's not just about protecting the environment, but having an area where people can access nature is great for mental health for the town residents. It attracts people who want to live here, and I know people who have moved here just for the birding. And I also know that, you know, it's something that people really think is important, and I think is really important. So do you feel that there is more input needed in this kind of short timeline to get the information to be able to make those land use planning decisions, that there's enough information that you've been able to gather to be able to make those? Or is there time still in the next few months for people to input those or to work with people regionally to try to make sure all that information is on the table?
That's a great question, Tammy. So what is being done right now is we're identifying existing conditions. So we're identifying the potential for natural heritage and endangered species. So through that, we're going to be providing recommendations for buffers, particularly from two creeks in the woodlot area. What is going to come out of this exercise, though, are recommendations for more specific environmental impact assessments to be conducted with development approvals. And that's where you're going to be addressing those concerns of 4-season assessments, right? So the work that we're doing now is not the complete assessment. We're providing recommendations for areas that we do feel should be protected. And then with the development applications that go through, whether it's a draft plan of subdivision or site plan control application, the requirement in certain areas for that additional analysis and assessment.
Thanks. That's been a really good explanation of the whole process. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Matthew,
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. I'm new to the process. I represent my mother, property owner on Detroit line. And a lot of questions, and I won't go into all of them here, but just on the surface, first question that comes to mind is how is this going to affect our taxes, which are already quite high? A second question would be the detan drain has really been a disaster ever since it was put in. It's never worked. It's never been maintained or cleaned. Very rarely, I should say. We have properties and a lot of water problems because that drain does not work properly. And then just for our short time here now, I'm curious as to, the overall project. I mean, why is this being pushed as opposed to just a natural progression of development? It seems like this is a push to develop the area, obviously above and beyond what would just be a natural growth of people coming into the area. And, all these people, however this is all going to end up, what will their accesses to the lakefront, and you're going to bring in a lot more population, a lot more traffic, and so there's going to be a lot of growing pains, it seems to me. And I just wonder how this has all been thought out. And I'm new to this whole Imagine Wheatley, so some of these answers may be out there, and I apologize if I have not haven't done my homework yet, but I'm just getting there.
Yeah, well, they're all really good questions, Matthew. I think it's important. You brought up a good point about just letting things organically happen with development. I think one of the great things though about secondary plans is that it's looking at it from a very holistic perspective, looking at stormwater management, road networks, and everything is going to be. Not all this development is going to happen tomorrow. This is kind of a vision for the next 20, 30 years and how you'd like to see this area develop. And there's efficiencies with that, and there's good planning with that as well, just so that we're not just plopping down more residential areas and in parts of that secondary plan area that may not be well serviced for it. So it's looking at a more like holistic approach. I'm going to turn over to the municipality about the detan drain. That's something that will be part of our opportunities and constraints, and how that is going to be maintained or updated. I'm not sure if Ryan, I can't really see any folks.
Yep. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, I'm here. Thanks for the question, Matthew. So we are familiar with the detan drain. So surface water, even from north of First Concession Line, comes down through that next property south through the detan drain. Two other outlets that are possible for stormwater over the course of time as development occurs are both east and west into two creeks and into the coastal wetland that flows into the harbor. So the detailed servicing strategy is going to look at the existing condition of the detan drain, its capacity and potential for the existing flows, additional flows or decreased flows, as well as the alternatives in putting more water either east or west into those other water courses that enter the lake. So no definitive answers yet on what will happen with the detan drain. However, it is one of three existing outlets to the site now, so it's certainly in the mix for consideration. Thank you.
Hello, this is Douglas Semivan. Can you hear me?
I can.
I have a question. Prestige Foods has most recently put up a barbed wire fence inside the perimeter of this development area? Are you aware of that, and can you respond?
Sorry, I'm muted there. Yeah, Douglas, I'm not aware of anything specific to Prestige Foods. It's not really within the scope of the secondary plan process. I'm not sure if the town, or sorry, if Chatham-Kent would like to respond to that.
It's
Yeah,
quite a area of barbed wired land.
thanks, Amy. It's Ryan Jocks here, again, Director of Planning. The Prestige property is at the extreme, I guess, southwest end of the study area. We have Prestige as a stakeholder, as a landowner in the secondary plan. I wasn't aware of the fence, but I am aware of plans that they have approved to expand their facility with more office and cooler storage space at that site. So that those lands owned by Prestige, which are bordered by those 3 roads, will continue to be privately owned by Prestige.
Okay, I understand that. I just wondered if they were making a sort of preemptive strike into the property to preserve something for themselves ahead of the regional plan.
Mm-hmm. Fair question. I don't read into it that way, but certainly Prestige is involved in this process. So we look forward to talking to them again as this goes on.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Joe DeRoche, I see your hand up there.
Hello, is my video on?
Your video is on, yes. We
Okay.
can see you.
Yeah, so anyways, I just thought I'd introduce myself. My name's Joe DeRocher. I'm one of the stakeholders in for all the property north of Concession 1 and east of Erie Street. I had prepared a little something to say. I'm not a great public speaker, but I just wanted to introduce myself. I didn't want to, I live right on Erie Street. We look over the bush and the property every single day. We take our dogs for walks in the property every single day. I was a real estate agent locally for years. I've bought and sold and renovated tons of properties in Wheatley. We've had a vacation rental business in Wheatley. My wife was born and raised in Wheatley. So we are very much our whole development ideas, proposals have been to bring amenities to Wheatley, to protect the lands. We have no desire whatsoever to rip down trees and build houses, in the trees. We met with the Wheatley Task Force and different people. It was a couple years ago, we met with Chatham-Kent over this area, and they've been really good to deal with along the way. We hired a company from overseas to help us along with our concept and our plans. And we presented to 10 to 12 staff members. And out of that did come this Imagine Wheatley idea and how we've moved forward with that. So I do want to thank the staff for making Wheatley a priority. I think it's been a community feeling that Wheatley kind of gets left off the map when it comes to Chatham-Kent, when it comes to funding and priorities. So I believe everyone would be in agreement that we appreciate that this meeting is coming and things are starting to move forward. But I just wanted to introduce myself, and if anyone ever has questions for me, I'm around town. People are more than welcome to ask anything. We do have animated concepts that we've come up with that has been presented to the town. I guess my only concern was that, we put forward a lot of time, effort, finances to bring forward this proposal. When we did our risk analysis and everything else, it was based on the official plan of Wheatley. So I think it's great that there is a secondary plan. I think it's great that it's everyone's talking. We're talking lots about the revitalization of downtown. There's never been plans to move the downtown to the, I know I've heard a million rumors. I've had so many people ask me questions. We purchased this land before, we've ongoing purchased some more land, but this wasn't a plan after the fact of the downtown incident. So this is just something for the future Wheatley. And I think my only concern would echo, I think, what the previous gentleman had said about a natural progression in development, as seeing there. I know it's a very, very small possibility that the land south of concession line 1 and east of Pickerel would be zoned immediately to residential. But if that were the case and it wasn't a natural progression and it was all this residential land put out at is already working on these. There's several properties in Wheatley that are already zoned residential that are working forward for development. So if an additional 55, 60 acres south of concession line 1 was zoned residential right away, I think there's probably between 10 and 20 new home builds in Wheatley per year. So to throw out, there's already 25 years plus probably land for development. I think the Olmsted subdivision has taken 20 years, and it's finally this year kind of coming to completion. And that was maybe, someone could correct me, but it's maybe 60 lots or 65 or something like that. So that took 20 years. So to rezone tons of land, I guess my advice, hopes would it be done in a phased approach, so that there would be that natural progression, so that I just think it would kill everybody trying to develop land, or if that was done and there's 5, 6 subdivisions going on in Wheatley when there's going to be 10 or 20 new home builds. So anyways, that's all about what I had to say. I really just wanted to stick my face in front of everybody in case, I didn't want to hide behind the camera as much as part of me. It's a quiet meeting, so I didn't really want to do that. I thought it was easier just to say nothing, but I just want to say I'm local. I'm living in Wheatley, and if anyone ever wants to chat, I'm more than happy to chat and would love any input from anyone regarding things moving forward.
Great, thank you, Joe. Thanks for that. I'm going to quickly jump to some comment questions, and then we have a few other hands up as well. And just for the sake of time, we have about 5-6 more minutes left for the Q&A at this point. So one of the questions we have from Joanne: what would be the timeline for the build after approval? And so again, with the secondary plan process, this is just putting the land use designations and zoning designations in place. Build after approval really has to do more with when these development approvals and applications come into the municipality, and also when the servicing will be in place. And so the servicing has to be there and the infrastructure has to be there before there is development. So, the phased approach is being anticipated here, and more details will come throughout the secondary plan process. We also I did not really understand the last answer and even was not sure what the question meant. Could you please provide more details? I'm not sure what question that was. So Frank, you may want to just kind of jump in again on that one.
Yeah, the question was about the Detroit line question about lands that there was no development on and what was not included in the plan. I'm new here. I live on Detroit line right on the lake. So the question kind of jumped out at me, but I don't understand exactly what was asked and what was answered. Okay,
yeah. So Mark, across the street, there is an area that is like the Two Creeks area. That's what I'm assuming that the Lower Thames Valley Conservation Area has jurisdiction over. And the response there is, any land uses that would be proposed would have to be compatible with the natural heritage areas. So more of a broad answer, because there is nothing that has been specifically applied for or proposed in that area. So I hope that provides a little bit of clarity.
Yes, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. William, what impacts are anticipated for existing homeowners, specifically those on the waterfront nearest these new developments? How will new residents access the lake and through which accesses? And so, there is no we do not have those land use alternatives available at this time. We are still going through the preliminary exercise. And so, that will be determined as we come up with the recommendations, and also with regards to the development approvals that come forward for those properties. Let's see. Okay. Going back to Stephen Smart, I see your hand's been up for a little bit there.
So Joe is one of the key players in this. I wanted to find out who the other shareholders in this development were. And I also wanted to find out, obviously, they've put forth a layout of what their ideas are and when we'd be able to see what they're anticipating to be the layout of the lands, where stuff's going to be before we get to the next stage. I mean, that's kind of critical in making some decisions.
Right, Stephen. So in terms of the landowners, all that we can say is that they are local landowners as far as we're aware, and we can't really give specific information. Joe stepped forward and introduced himself. In terms of the land uses, the public is going to have an opportunity to see what those proposed land use alternatives are from a preliminary standpoint, and also once they get to the approval stage. Any other development applications that come forward go through the planning approvals process as well. So there will be opportunities to provide comment. And I see, Ron, you have your hand up there. I'm not sure if that's specific to this question.
Just to provide a bit of planning context for the workshop. And the starting point, as has been discussed by Gabriel, is the official plan. And when you look in the official plan, you'll see that there is a land use plan for Wheatley. And that land use plan includes the South Wheatley area. And you'll see from looking on that plan that essentially the north half of this triangle has principle of land use for residential. There's another area that is designated urban reserve, and that reflects the availability of full services. And then there's designation related to more urban type employment. And that is, from a policy perspective, kind of the framework within which ourselves and the community and staff will be looking at land use alternatives. As well, you can see when you look on that map in the official plan, there's green areas that represent the wooded areas adjacent to the creek, as well as some recreational area designation. And you'll note in the middle of this study area is infrastructure servicing. And that's an important point to remember. And another gentleman mentioned the issue of taxes. And the plan is to make the best use of existing infrastructure. These are urban lands. These are lands that are serviced. What is the best way to capitalize on this infrastructure? The other point that someone mentioned was, what's the impact on taxes? Well, as part of the overall planning exercise, the municipality will continue to be looking at fiscal impact to be able to identify what is the impact of this new development. How are we paying for services? What are certain carrying costs that will be applied later? How does this relate to development charges? So these are all things that will be discussed as part of the planning exercise for South Wheatley. But I thought it'd be important just to talk about the starting point.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ron. That was some great context. So for the sake of time, and I think we only have one more question, and Howard, I'm going to turn that over to you if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Howard Gabert with the Wheatley Task Force. I just wanted to use this opportunity just to clarify, I guess, the position of the Wheatley Task Force as it pertains to this. And I think as has been explained, this Wheatley secondary plan, it predates the explosion and also the mandate of our task force. So our mandate is basically to advocate for long-term recovery of the town. And so I guess our position, towards this secondary plan is that we support it. We think that it will help the long-term growth of the town, but we see this as one piece of the puzzle for the long-term recovery of the town, but not the entirety of it. Our goal is to continue to try to recover the town in the downtown in its location as best as we can. A lot of the long-term decisions are going to be contingent on the outcome of the final Golder report. What we are advocating for is an urban plan that encompasses the entirety of the town versus just the secondary plan area. So that's what we're advocating for in our meetings with Chatham-Kent and provincial authorities as well. So I guess in general we support this plan, but this is there's a lot more that we're advocating for beyond just a secondary plan. So just wanted to take the opportunity with the captive audience and just to clarify the position of the task force. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that, Howard. Much appreciated.